Well, the scripture that went up there was from last week. We've changed over our media platform, and so there's some glitches this week a little bit, but it's going to be a smooth thing. But actually, it's sort of nice because I wanted to start off talking again a little bit about that writing on the wall. If you remember last week, if you were here, I had said that one of the things that I had to get a handle on was using the phone in my car. And so you guys are part of my accountability crew. I did pretty well. A couple times I had this thought, the girls weren't with me. Well, they're not with me, partly because they wouldn't say, Mommy, and probably because I had this thought, well, they couldn't be hurt, right, because they're not in the car. And then I realized, yeah, but you could be hurt, and so could other people. So just quit, that addictive quality is hard. But I've done pretty well, and I'm going to keep going with it. And here's another reason why. You guys may have seen this in the news. A young man who had been doing Teach for America in the Bronx after getting out of college saw folks that needed affordable housing, and he decided to bring attention to that by riding his bike across the United States to bring attention to this important issue. As he was biking to Oklahoma, he was hit by a car this past week and killed. And the person who hit him said, I was distracted by my phone. And I was just brokenhearted. Because I think I've been thinking about this so much, I felt like it could be me that did that, because I keep thinking about this future and she's living in that future now. She's living in a future where she's taken this beautiful young man's life who was doing things to make this world a better place. So if there's ever something that we can do that can make a difference, it's attend to these little addictive things that we have, especially our phones in the car, which is just not okay. And so we look at these moral issues as Christians, and as people who are gathered together, people who are looking out for the common good, and that brings us now into Amos. If you've been reading the Bible in 90 days, you know that we are now done with the Old Testament. Not that the Old Testament isn't awesome, but no, it's just long, and some of it's hard to read, and you don't know, and it can be sort of faith-shaking to think, what is this supposed to tell me about God and about myself? But it's good stuff. It's good stuff to chew on. But before we launch into the Gospels, which we'll be doing next week, I wanted to camp for a minute on the prophet Amos. He was in this last week's reading. And Amos is a really interesting prophet for a lot of reasons. But the first thing is, if you remember, we were talking about the Babylonian exile, and Daniel was in Babylon. Amos, even though it's further ahead in the Old Testament, it's a lot earlier. Amos was when the northern kingdom was still there. Prosperous, rich people, doing great trade routes, intellectual, all those things in the northern kingdom. And it was bigger, it was the powerhouse. And we know that later Assyrian Empire wiped them out. But Amos was, he describes himself as a shepherd and someone who tends sycamore trees. He lived in the south, so if all of Israel is like a lozenge, you think of an oval. The south is about the bottom third, the north was the 2/3 up there. Jerusalem was in the south. Amos lived over in this corner that wasn't too far from the north. And he felt God convict him to go to the north. So he's a southern guy, a southern farmer kind of guy. Go to the north and talk to them about justice. Because what was happening in the north was this incredible disparity between the haves and the have-nots. The people with the money were exploiting the people that had nothing. One of the key ways that they were doing that is if you were trying to keep a farm, a little farm, but you needed to go into debt a bit because you had to buy something for the next season, these people that lent you the money would do it at rates that would be guaranteed to break you. Then they would come in and they would take the property from you. So these exploitations of the poor were happening by the people of God, on the people of God. This wasn't some foreign oppressive power. These were people that said that they worshiped Yahweh that were exploiting the poor. So Amos went up there. And I have two images to give you, and one of these may stick for you. Both of them apply to Amos. There is a Dr. Seuss book called The Lorax. Some of you know he's a little guy with a big old mustache that hangs down. I think that Dr. Seuss modeled the Lorax on Amos because Amos was a tender of trees. That's what he says. The Lorax is always, I speak for the trees. And he's an annoying little guy, but he's clear and he's going up there, and Amos did too. The other image, so that might work for some of you that know the Lorax. Some others of you may be familiar with the honey badger on the internet. And there's a whole video that's not ready for Sunday morning with the language, but there's this video about the honey badger who just doesn't care. The honey badger is a tough little dude, and he doesn't care. And in fact, truly, in the Guinness Book of World Records, the honey badger is listed as the most fearless creature on earth. And I think Amos was kind of a honey badger. He just doesn't care. He's going up there, and God's giving him a word to say, and he's going to speak the truth to power, and that's what he did. And the northern people didn't like it. And so they said, you prophet, you get back into Judah where you belong. You can't prophesy here. And he said, I don't owe you anything. I'm not making money off of this. You can't tell me what to do. I tend trees. I've got my own livelihood. God spoke to me, and I'm up here because of God. God is speaking through Amos. God saying, I don't care about any of your worship. Your worship can be as pure as you want it to be. You can give me all of this. I don't care, because you're not first being just. Do that, and then come and worship me. But you don't get to act like that through the whole rest of your week and then come in here and celebrate and say that you're the people of God. So it was a tough awakening sort of a word. And so the first thing that we have to look at are the moral issues that we are engaged in that are exploitive. Because remember, the deal was, it wasn't that he was saying you should be more just. He was saying you are actually being unjust to the poor. And so he asked them to change their ways. So I'm assuming that nobody here is an arms dealer and nobody here is the drug trafficker, a lot of things. Though there's some easy ones, I think. There are certain things that we're involved in that are exploitive and that our faith calls us to do differently. Unfortunately, it gets a little more subtle. There's a whole other realm of things that are a huge problem in the United States today. Human trafficking, exploitation of children, degradation of the environment, all of these things are huge problems in America. And so we have to do an inventory and look at, is there anything that I'm doing that involves me in those? And I'm just going to tell you straight up, it can be tricky because sometimes you give money into an investment thing or something and you don't know where that money's going, and there's all kinds of ways. When we buy clothes, you don't know, were these clothes made in a fair way? Did people get treated fairly? All we can do is keep our eyes open. So the first thing that Amos is asking us to do is just to wake up to our choices and what we're doing in our lives and the impact that it's having. Are we participating in the systems of injustice? And if we are, stop. But it can be hard in this world. Thinking about, as I had said, there are prophets that are emerging today. I think the Pope, I've been talking about him a lot this summer after reading the encyclical on the environment. I think he's got some honey badger in him because he came right out and he just comes right out and says it. And he said there's a problem with corporations that go in and they pay some meager amount to take the land, to take the wood, to take whatever it is from people that are poor. But then they leave these horrible messes behind and they don't pay to clean that up and to help the people. Well, that got him into hot water with a bunch of very powerful corporate people. And there are people that he goes online and he talks about taking care of the poor and making sure that there's health care and food for people. And he's immediately pilloried. I made the mistake one time. I was reading something that he had said and y'all don't ever read the comments. It's just leave it alone. Don't read the comments because you go down roads, but people hate what he's saying and they immediately call him a socialist. It's that idea of social justice is political. And again, I'm saying we're going to go down deeper to a deeper level where it's about moral issues. I think that's what the Pope is saying. He's saying what Jesus Christ said, who, by the way, I think also didn't care so much about what people in power and wealthy people had to say. Jesus just said it. He came out, and if there was hypocrisy that he saw, he named it.
This week, I read Richard Rohr's meditations. They come in email, and I commend them to you. If you want more information about that, I can give it to you. But he's a priest. He's a Franciscan priest living in New Mexico, and he's been talking about the mystics. And he was talking about St. John of the Cross. St. John was part of an order of monks, and they were starting to get corrupt. He saw them getting a lot of money. There was a power that was coming to them, but they were supposed to be under a vow of poverty. And he looked at that and he thought, we've got to reform. We have to do differently if we're going to follow Jesus Christ. And so he started setting a lot of things in motion, and he made a lot of people in his order very mad. And so they took him, they abducted him, and they took him into a prison. His little prison cell was 10 feet by 6 feet. And he was just there. He had no change of clothes. His one thing he had rotted off of him. They would take him out every week and flog him while they sat and watched and ate their lunches because he had threatened them so badly. He finally escaped after 9 months of that and made it back and did end up effecting reforms. So these folks, these tough folks who stand up and say, we've got to do this differently, that's a risky path. People get threatened, and when you threaten people that are in power or that have money and they're getting uncomfortable, they don't like it. They want you to stop. But there's this idea about the Bible and about the Holy Spirit in general being, the whole purpose is, and you've probably heard this, to afflict the comfortable and to comfort the afflicted. And so we sort of have to figure out where we are on that. There are a lot of issues that come up in our world, and we have the opportunity to be a positive influence in this world. First, you look at, is there anything I'm doing that's participating in systems of injustice? But then look at, is there more that I could do to help justice be part of who we are in this country? And so everybody's going to have different things that will touch your heart. I know for myself, I'm still looking for how I can make a positive difference with all of the racial injustice that we're seeing, with police officers, certain ones, not all of them, but certain ones that are abusing power, and there's a race component to that. And what can we do that's constructive? What can we do that's helpful? That's on my heart. But this past week, there was a lion called Cecil killed in Zimbabwe by an American dentist. And I've seen a lot of people respond by saying they want to behead the man who shot him, and terrible ugliness, death threats, and that terrifies me. There's nothing constructive about that, no matter how angry you are. So what is constructive? Well, we have to think through. I've seen some stuff just in terms of people who are really affected by Cecil the lion. Folks are giving money to conservation groups that are out there trying to help the animals. Other people I've seen have said, you know what, I realize I'm part of this because I eat animals that are on factory farms. I'm going to eat less meat. I've seen some really creative and positive things, and it's kind of exciting. That's what we have to do. It's so tempting, especially online, when we can just be as vicious as we want to be. That's not the Christian way. There's nothing constructive in that. So instead, we have to think, what can I do? What can I do? Well, I saw, again online, I saw something that I thought was the most creative thing ever. It's kind of in the file folder, I guess, with Steve's dueling signage for the road, maybe. But there was a KKK rally that was going to happen in South Carolina, and it did. You know, they get a permit ahead and free speech, and KKK was coming out. And it would have been real easy for people to go and just yell at them, but again, not particularly constructive. But this young man who played the sousaphone's kind of like a tuba, he went out there with them. So they're marching, you know, this KKK guys, but he's playing the doofiest music you have ever heard. So their march had a soundtrack that was like, a doop 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 doop, and he just made them look stupid. And I thought, now that's creativity, man. You know, it's just, okay, I'm giving you a little soundtrack, and it's the doofiest thing you ever heard. And I had to think it kind of took the wind out of their sails a little bit on their KKK march. So we can be creative too. We can look at the injustices around us. But one thing that's really hard, it just is to realize our own positions of privilege to realize where we are. We live in the United States of America. We've talked about this before. If you have flushed a toilet today, you are more privileged than most of the people in the rest of the world. 60 million people today are displaced from their homes from unrest or war or natural disaster, more than ever in the history of mankind. I just keep thinking about these 60 million people. We are so privileged. No one is making me flee my home. You know, I mean, we've got water. We can water our lawns with drinking water. Girls in Africa walk 4 miles to get questionable water that they then bring back in buckets. Drinking water waters our lawns. We are so privileged. It's only when we can recognize how much we have that we can start to accept that we have some responsibility. So a few years ago in some of the universities, they started doing a thing with their classes called a privilege walk, where they start everybody on the same line, and then they ask questions, and based on the answer, you either take a step forward or you take a step back. So I want to show you a video that's an example of one of those privilege walks.
Some people are born into families where they have to walk miles just to get water. All I have to do is turn on a faucet. That's privilege.
I think privilege is when some people have some things and other people don't have things.
I feel privilege is something that you don't even really have control over.
I think it'd be silly for me to say I don't have a fair amount of privilege, considering like the country I live in and the job I get to do and the college I was allowed to go to.
I suppose being a white male will help me end up somewhere towards the front, but I'll take a few steps back from being gay.
I don't think I'll make it to the front. I think I'll maybe be in the middle. That's just the gut feeling I have.
If your parents work nights and weekends to support your family, take one step back. If you can show affection for your romantic partner in public without fear of ridicule or violence, take one step forward. If you were embarrassed about your clothes or house while growing up, take one step back. If you have ever been diagnosed as having a physical or mental illness or disability, take one step back. If you have ever been bullied or made fun of based on something you can't change, take one step back. If you get time off for your religious holidays, take one step forward. If you came from a supportive family environment, if you can see a doctor whenever you feel the need, if you are able to move through the world without fear of sexual assault, if you took out loans for your education, if there were more than 50 books in your house growing up. So these are your final positions.
I think it felt kind of strange for everyone.
It's a hard thing to discuss or even reflect on. It was very awkward.
I think when you can represent it so visually like this and so immediately, it definitely takes on a new form.
I think we were like all joking around in the beginning. It was pretty lighthearted, and as soon as the questions started coming in, the mood shifted immediately, and we all it was just silent.
Just looking back and seeing like a bunch of people behind you is not a good feeling.
It's like weird how you want to like hold on to explaining a certain privilege, like, oh, but that's not actually me, because like I had to work really hard for that. So it's weird to like take a step forward when you feel like you're taking a step forward with someone else, but you wear a lot of the baggage of like how those things were hard.
It was like more emotional than I thought it would be.
It reminded me of when they talk about slavery in high school and you feel like angry for a few days, but then you just realize like, this is how it is.
For me, it was kind of frustrating almost to look back and see how much further some people were behind me, and realizing that, you know, a lot of that stuff, no amount of hard work or even legislation can make up that gap.
It's interesting being an Asian American because you're not really sure where you fall on the spectrum of privilege.
I know that for me, one of the reasons I ended up so far back was that there are questions around safety as an African American, as a woman, as a gay woman. There are just so many different ways that I don't feel safe.
I feel like I just learned to be grateful for what you have. You know, we're in such a huge society where it's always complaining about what you don't have.
It just shows you that For some families, like each family, you're meant to do better. My grandparents did good, my parents did good, and I'll do even better.
I do think if you're not like aware of privilege, you should do this exercise, but it's more complicated.
So it is more complicated. All of us have different places where we would be on this, but I think that what can happen is when we are made aware of how good we've got it, even if it's not as good as someone else, there can be empathy that you start to have. This past week, I'm just going to brag a little bit on Lola. I was really proud. She went to Stevens Ranch. It's really hot in those cabins. We sent her with a little fan that's battery operated. Her friend that went with her didn't have one. It was really hot. And Lola gave the fan to her for one of the nights. And when she was telling me about this, she said, well, we had 2 nights at Stevens Ranch, and I had the fan. It's me 2 nights with the fan and her 0, or we both have the fan 1 night. And I thought maybe it comes down to that. Maybe it comes down to realizing we have so much, and we can share it, and we have a responsibility to help. So open your eyes this week to your own privilege, to the ways in which justice plays out. The way you spend your money makes a difference. There are stores that do better than others, and we can find this stuff out. Costco, for example, pays its people a living wage, and they have benefits. So good to know. There are ways that we can vote for justice with how we spend our money, and we can make these changes. And then when we come to worship, then it's all about what it needs to be about. We're living our lives in alignment with what Christ wants from us, and then we come and our worship is different. I've asked Spencer to come up.